open-ended focus,
I want to record your comments, so go ahead. Go ahead.
like an open-ended focus group to find out any number of things like what would people be interested in, what where do they listen, what do they listen to, when do they listen to, because we really don't know. So we're just kind of guessing, and we'll throw something up on the wall and see if there's an audience that accumulates around it. But we really don't know what people want to hear. The other thing that I think it's really important is what can we do that other people are not doing? Because one of the things that people have said over and over again is like there's such a surplus of media that you can consume that it's really hard to stand out. Now there's a bunch of stuff that people are not getting at any other stations, or any other media, that we could be covering. So if we try to compete with other stations that have big budgets, professional, um, paid employees, and the rest of it, we're going to get clobbered. But if we're doing something that nobody else is doing, then we'll have that audience kind of all to ourselves.
No, that makes sense.
And then the final thing that I would suggest is rather than design or create a show and then see if there's an audience for it, turn the binoculars around and go, okay, where's the big audience? And as an example, I think a teacher's call-in show, KPFK has a huge audience of teachers. And if you had a teacher's call-in show, not policy, not wonk, not whatever the government did or whatever, but just teachers calling in from their schools, talking about their issues and their superintendent, it'd be extremely popular. And teachers have money. And ditto for nurses, like a nurse's call-in show where people can just talk about what's going on in their hospital, and I'll shut up and let other people talk.
No, that's interesting. Just so everybody knows, we have not started the meeting yet. We're waiting for folks to get in, and Bruce is offering some really interesting ideas here. So if anybody wants to say anything, please go ahead.
Yeah, that's a very good idea, Bruce. And just as good would be a show for truck drivers because they listen to the radio all the time.
Oh, that would be wonderful, Grace. That's a great idea.
Yeah, a call-in show. It would be fantastic.
Actually, Grace has said a number of times that we need to do some market research, but nobody seems to listen to her. But she's absolutely right. No, I mean, how do large companies do this kind of focus group in a mall? They'll stop people walking around in the mall and they go like, well, which windows did you like? What did you, why are you here? And yet we don't do that. I mean, we have to do it. 100 people. And it's like 20 minutes each. And it's something that the cabs or the volunteers could very effectively do. And not just, multiple choice questions. You really have to ask people, what do you want to listen to? And I forget, it was the Department of Defense, the head of the defense, I'm not remembering his name. He says, like, there's three things: the things that we know, the things that we know we don't know, and the things that we don't know we don't know. And those are the most dangerous. And that's really what we need to concentrate on: the things that we don't know we don't know. That's it.
Absolutely. Market research is essential if we want to increase our listenership, and it's relatively very inexpensive. It can be done by volunteers, but even paying for it is inexpensive.
Yes, Grace, it's totally.
Since nobody's talking, a friend of ours who used to be on the LSD at KPFK years ago has a blog, very, very substantial blog, teacher's blog, because there's an effort of teachers are being fired right and left, just a few years before their retirement.
Got it.
So that school districts that are becoming corporatized can hire younger teachers at a much reduced salary. And it's a whole, it's a whole situation that the media won't pick up on. So a teacher show would really be good. There are so many teachers, especially if it's a call-in show.
The issue is you can't really have teachers do it. Ex-teachers could do it. You can't have anybody doing it who is got to protect themselves.
Yeah, so you got a retired teacher. I mean,
It's got to be retired or,
Yeah.
activists or
they
people who are good at radio and are interested in teaching. But it's an awesome idea. Same thing with unions. You could have a union show, but you can't have the union people do it. We had a problem with that in Houston.
I mean, I'll
One
just
of
say,
the KPFA LSB members is a fired teacher from that
Yeah.
blog that I'm talking about, Brian Crowell.
Is he good on the radio?
He was I don't know. He's an LSD member at KPFA.
Well, put on the radio and say, see what you do.
the other
Can
thing
you-
that we don't do, we don't toot our own horn. I'll give you a really good example. Mayor Adams in New York City just decided to cut the education budget by $210 million. And if you listen to the controller, it's more like $425 is actually what he's cutting from the education budget. And everybody got like all upset and everything because it's kind of not what he ran on. And a bunch of people got together, including Arthur Schwartz, who has advocating for justice on WBAI and is the foundation's lawyer, got together and got a TRO issued that effectively stops him from cutting the budget, which is like fantastic news. Now, do you think we said anything about it? Do you think we told anybody about it? I mean, this is kind of like, this is why you listen to WBAI, because we turn information into action. I mean, it's just like amazing, but no, we don't say nothing.
I wish we could call the meeting to order because this stuff is actually too good to waste.
Do we have
Have-
quorum yet?
I don't know who's on the committee. What do we got? According to this. See, I don't know if I have the latest information. According to this, we have 15 people on this committee. But I don't know if this is right. Where's Heather? Heather, come back. We need you.
I'm sorry, I'm here. So, let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So what would be quorum? It's right, we have, I don't know, maybe we could start it. Yes, we
How
have.
many
quorum.
people? How many people are on the committee according to you? I
Yeah,
have 15.
exactly.
with this
Exactly. No, I
listed.
have that as well. I think
There's 8.
probably not everybody on the program on here is actually on the committee, but I appreciate everybody being here, I need to say. But
Heather,
yes,
this is Kim. I'm not a member. I'm just listening.
yeah, okay, thank you. So,
And obviously Mo isn't a member. He's management, or Otis.
right.
This is Donna. I'm a member. This is
Yeah, I
my
have
first
you down.
meeting.
I have you down, Donna.
Okay, it's my
That's
first meeting.
2.
And
This is
me.
James. I'm also not a member,
Yeah.
just here by invitation.
So can we wait just a few minutes? I am recording all of this, however, but before we go online.
Yeah, and so am I, but what do we do with it?
What do we do with it? We use it.
It'll be the Programming Skunk Works Committee.
Yes.
secret deliberations that you were not allowed to hear.
No, if you go and look at the World War II, when they were developing stuff, all the best inventions came out of skunk works projects that weren't supposed to be going on.
The guy designed a building for somebody and the owner looked at it and he said, "What's the story with the hallways?" The guy said, "Well, I made them really small so that you have big offices." The guy says, "No, the hallways are where the important meetings take place. I want big hallways."
So I know, for example, Fred Dodsworth, who's on the committee, he's on vacation, so he contacted me that he's not able to be on the meeting. He's one. So what do we do? Can we still wait a little bit longer?
Yeah, we can wait.
Okay, with that,
I see Grace is here.
Yeah,
But
Grace. is here.
I see Rachel, Scotty Battle, Lillian, Care, Jim. Is David here?
No, he's not
He's-
here yet. I'm going to give him a call. Ziri is also on the committee, but she couldn't attend tonight. So I do know that. So let me call Jim, see if I can get him.
Is here Wally, Ali, Philip Muldery, Jim McFadden, Ziri Rudeau. Wow, Egberto.
Scott, so what makes a quorum then? Again, tell me, out of 15, what's a quorum?
8.
A quorum is
Eight.
eight, but one person dropped out, so that would bring it down to seven. Someone in the email.
No, it would
just,
still be 8, Grace, officially. It's 15.
14. Oh,
So if you
okay.
go
Still
to
eight.
14, it's still 8. Unless you have half a person, you're gonna have half a person.
My apology that we're having to wait like this, so.
Well, Heather's the chair, couldn't she just kick some people off for a meeting or two?
Are we getting the echo?
I didn't hear one.
There's Ali Lexa. That's good. Okay. Now the echo's gone for some strange reason. Hi,
I don't know.
Ali.
Is that me?
I don't know. I have no idea. It could be Otis. All right. So how many do we have here? Let's see. One. Two. Three.
I'm not sure that Saturday afternoon at
5
4
o'clock is a
Central
good
is a-
idea. Good idea.
it's a really popular time.
Okay, so. Oh, here's Jim. All right. I think we're going to start, Otis. Wait, where's Jim? Jim Digman. There he is. Oh, hi, welcome. We were waiting for you.
Oh, you don't have to wait for me. You can start without me. You don't have to worry about me.
We have not started yet.
Fine.
All right, so now I have a question to everyone here. So not everybody here is actually on the programming committee. So how do we address that when calling the roll? Or we just can start the meeting?
It puts me in a really tough position. I've made a pretty hard line at KPFTX that we could start a meeting and do Zoom, but it's not a meeting unless you have a quorum and call it to order. So
Okay.
that's,
okay.
Because it's Zoom, but
Okay, so let me
there
call.
have
who I
been many times that people say, well, can't we just get on and talk? And so, no.
Okay.
You could do that, but not as a meeting.
All right, so Grace Aaron. I'm going to call the meeting to order and see if we have the quorum. Grace Aaron.
Here.
Okay. Jim Digman.
Here.
Hold on a minute. Let me just see. Fred Dodsworth. I think he's not. I think he couldn't come. Heather Gray is here. Donna Grimes.
Here.
Wally James. Hold on a minute. Ali Lexa. Ali,
Hello.
you're here, right? So,
Yes.
Egberto Willies.
Aquí.
Okay. So who else on here is actually on the committee? Whose name I didn't call. Fred Dodsworth is not here, right? He's not.
Well, I got a question for you. Is Rachel Barr on this committee?
Yeah, she is, but that's
Okay.
the reason we had this at 5 o'clock.
Oh,
Not here.
is Lillian Kerr on the committee? I'm just asking. These are the people you didn't call.
I
You
don't
got
think so.
six. You don't think Lillian's on the committee?
No.
Okay. All right. That knocks it down to 7. So you got.
We got
so-
it, right?
Well, hold on. Is Philip Muldery on the committee?
Yes, he is.
What about Jim McFadden?
I think he is. Not
Yes,
sure.
yes.
Yeah.
Adele Stan?
Adele Stan just resigned.
Okay. So what do we do, Otis?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Philip announced he was resigning at the KPFA-LSB meeting about 2 to 3 weeks ago.
Right.
So I would not include him.
Right.
So that means you have 13 people here. You have, how many members are here? 7?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 6. Oh, here's Mo. Let's see. No, Mo's not on the committee. All right, so I don't know what to do.
Madam Chair, I
Yes,
would proceed. We're having a meeting. We're not having a formal meeting, but I would proceed and have a informal meeting because we have a lot to discuss.
I agree with that. All right, so I'm going to call this meeting to order then. So, all right, so could you put us on the air, as it were, Otis? And Otis is co-hosting tonight as well. Are we on? Well, we can't hear you.
Maybe it has to do with the fact that I'm muted. So I'm not muted now, and you are on the stream. And I was going to say, have a call, call the roll. I think you're okay.
All right, so I'm going to call the roll. Jim Dingman.
Here, here.
Ali Lexa.
Here.
Donna Grimes.
Present.
Egberto. Billy.
Present.
Bo Thomas.
Yes, I'm here.
I know that Jim Sag.
Well, you probably want to call members of the committee.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Is Mo a member?
No, he's not.
Okay, so look, I'm gonna call the roll because I have the list.
Okay, go ahead.
Grace Aaron.
Here.
Yeah. Rachel Barr. Scotty Battle. Is she still a member?
Yeah,
Okay,
not
Lillian
here.
Kerr. Is Lillian on this committee? Heather.
I don't think so. No.
Okay, hold on. Okay, I will call the rest. This is good. I'm sorry, my stuff is just taking as much time as it can. Dingman.
Here.
Dodsworth, not here. Heather Gray.
Here.
Donna Grimes.
Here.
Wally James is not here. Ali Lexa.
Here.
Jim McFadden, not here. Ziri, not here. Egberto.
Here.
Okay, so you got like 7. And your membership is 13. You have a quorum.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for your help on that. All right. So first of all, I'm wanting to thank everyone so much for the last meeting that we held. I was so impressed with the comments that people made. And from that, we will do a follow-up on this amazing discussion we had the last time. So the first item on the agenda actually is to explore ideas and specifics as to how we can bring the news entity, hold on just a moment. Bring news entities in Pacifica together to develop national news programs. So I appreciate your ideas on what we could do to accomplish that, to create this. So I'm sure many of you have ideas along this line. So Who wants to be first? How can we bring the various programs together to develop a national news program in all the various Pacifica stations? Who wants to comment first? Ideas, please. So Grace, let me ask you that question. What's your thinking along that line? Grace?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. I'm out and about, but anyway, I think that each station should provide 10 minutes a week. Start off with 1 hour a week that all stations agree to carry at a specific time or whatever. Then each station be responsible for 10 minutes or whatever amount of minutes, and also the affiliate network and the archives. So that would be 7. So divide 60 by 7 and something around there, and have it be really well edited clips, and then some sort of coordination so that there aren't redundant topics done. And just have the general managers be responsible for 7 minutes a week of highly well-produced programming. That's not that much of a burden. And see what they come up with, and have somebody volunteer from each station to take on the job of pulling together the 7 segments. And rotate it around. So there's 7 units. Have a unit take on that task once every couple of months, whatever the rotation is. That's what I would say to organize it.
And
That's my input.
Meet how often, Grace?
Okay, I think that they can sort that out. The point is that they've got to get 7 minutes of really good programming a week to contribute to this effort, and it would wind up being a 1 hour or so show when all the segments are put together by somebody, edit them together and then air it, and figure out, oh, this is a segment about blah 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 from WBAI, and then then do a tiny little 5-second intro, and then play the segment, and then the next station, next station, next station. Whatever would be the most interesting, of local to the station area, but of most interest to all of the stations. I'm sorry if I'm being confusing, but that's what I would say. That each station is tasked with producing 7 minutes of really good programming a week to contribute to a 1 hour show. Start off with one hour a week and expand it 2 hours a week, 3 hours a week. And then after a while, we might have a national show that would be really good. It's not such a big deal to expect 7 minutes of really good programming once a week to start. That's all. That's my idea.
So, well, anyone else have ideas along this line? So Grace, this would be a coordinated effort. Would they be meeting together to discuss this?
More doing and less meeting, okay? After they produce the 7 minutes, then they can meet to figure out something. I don't know. But, we don't want to clog this up with endless meetings and arguments. It's simple. That's what I think. Let's get something done.
All right, Jim to the stack.
Yeah, Otis had his hand up, and then I'll go to you, Jim. Go ahead, Otis.
Yeah, it's okay. Let Jim go. I was just going to say, I completely agree with Grace. I like that idea of show up with some stuff. I think you're going to, forgive me, because I know that we like democracy, but you're going to have somebody who's going to honcho this through. You're going to have a producer. That's my opinion. Somebody's going to have to say, where's your 7 minutes? Basically, it's going to happen. The other question is kind of a sense of what we want to see in that 7 minutes. What kind of stuff would be there? What is the sense of the show? And the other thing is 5 times 7 is 35. So something's going to get cut. But I think you're going to have an agreement among the people.
It's seven units. 7 units.
Oh, okay, that's 49 minutes. So you're saying you want to see 7 minutes from the PRA and 7 minutes from affiliates? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Oh, okay. Because I would have
yes.
more from affiliates. I think what you would find eventually is that there are some affiliates who are really interested and have the infrastructure to do it. And there are other affiliates that really don't. But I just think you're going to have somebody to kind of oversee it. And I realize that would put power in one person's hands, which of course is a great no-no. But I don't think it's going to happen without that. That's all. And it's not going to be me. Okay, so I'm out of the running. I said, yeah, somebody should be in charge, and it's not me. So
I
So
was
I don't
just going to
have-
volunteer you.
yeah, I know. Thank you. So because don't forget, we did that show in '96, that 2-hour show a week of about the election from all the affiliates. But there really does have to be somebody to watch over it and see that it actually happens, because things tend not to happen. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Question, it's Donna.
Okay, so we have, Donna, I know your hand's up, but Jim asked first, so
Oh,
Jim,
well,
go
let
ahead, and then
Donna-
we'll go to Donna.
Let
Go
Donna
ahead,
go. Let Donna go. Let Donna
Okay,
go. I'll
Donna,
wait.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just a clarifying question. Grace, are you suggesting one segment from each station, or possibly a couple of pieces pulled together to create the
I
segment?
think what Grace was saying was what makes sense. It was 7 minutes. That could be anything, I mean, it could be 3 pieces. It could be one big piece. Could be some blessed
Otis is right.
silence.
Otis is right. Whatever the station wants to provide. in 7
I
minutes.
think I say there's one person watching over it. That doesn't mean there's one person who is lord of all these surveys and pushes people around and says, don't do this. I'm not talking about gatekeepers. I'm talking about people who support other people getting stuff done. That's what I'm suggesting. It's not a boss. It's somebody who's going to have to do a lot of suffering to say, well, can you have the 7 minutes for me by next Tuesday, because we go on the air Tuesday afternoon. That kind of conversation is what's going to be. So it's not like you're going to be a big boss. And I think it's great to have the stations have autonomy, that you're going to have different people. The wonderful thing about community radio is we got different people doing stuff and they have different ideas. And if we can bring that stuff together, it gets to be very rich. That's anyway.
Well, thanks for that, Otis. So Jim Dingman, go ahead.
All right, there are many layers. The issue of what Grace proposed is an interesting idea. I just note that when one looks at longer produced segments at NPR or the BBC, 7-8 minutes is a pretty good, well-produced stretch. And, that would take a lot of work for somebody to do. But if they're going to produce that length of pieces, there needs to be a sort of a coordinating editorial function in there, like everybody will brainstorm what to work on so it's fresh on a daily basis, some coordination nationwide, and of course try to pick stories that are relevant not only if they're locally generated but have a national impact, or if they're international stories they stand alone. And then of course you have to sort of do that on an everyday basis. Now let's say at BAI we get I don't know, other people here may get that 3-minute segment that's done. I think it's a news summary that was, I know I was playing it in the morning show For 3 minutes, we'd start the morning show, introduce it, and then we'd play a 3-minute segment, which was sort of a news gathered headline piece. It was a short 3-minute piece. I would think that there's a need to, on a daily basis, figure out ways to do 3 to 4 minute pieces too, that are relevant to the news cycle, that then could be taken and dropped in, because we haven't even talked about local news programming yet, which is one of the big problems in terms of general in the United States and in particular in the network. The only well-developed news system seems to be KPFA, because they have 6 or 7. I think they have at least 6 or 7 people dedicated to just do news. So that gives them a big advantage. I know in a PFW, Sue Goodwin is now the news director. So she has a lot of experience. But then in Texas, and I don't know what's going on in Los Angeles with all these different initiatives. Ali could fill us in on that. But I know New York, it's really left to DiRienzo to do the local news. So that's one aspect. The need to have a constant stream of timely 3 to 4 minute segments that are produced that have a national and international scope. Now, the other thing that we talked about in previous meetings was to have another aspect of it to produce 3-minute commentaries. Now that's hard to do, to get somebody who's a big pundit to knock their ideas down to 3 minutes. But I know that in New York we were talking about that as a way to fill in, top of the hour. Here you got a 3-minute commentary. This again has to be fresh. It has to be right to the news cycle. And of course, we're doing this with voluntary labor. Now, Otis raises a good point. Somebody has to sort of be the steward of all this, coordinate it together, and that's an important aspect of it. But I'm just thinking about how we implement this, because I'm interested today to think about implementation. And again, it would be offered to all the stations, and I agree, to get the affiliates involved would be terrific, because I have a feeling we get some amazing stuff out of them. Because you have so many and you have a lot of talent out there that's not really put into the news cycle. I also would think that we should begin preparing a coordination to cover the midterms in terms of what's going on there. And that would definitely be useful to get the affiliates involved, because some of them are in red states. A lot of them are in red states.
Thanks for
Anyway,
that,
that's
Jim.
my opinion.
Thank you. Just so everybody knows, I'm trying to time some of this too. So we agreed, I think, to have 2 minutes for comments. So it's kind of hard sometimes because everybody has wonderful comments. We do have Ursula on the call here. I do want to ask before we go, continue with this discussion, do we have individuals in all the various Pacifica stations that are engaged in some kind of news at that station? Do we have that? I don't know. Could anybody share that with me? Or Otis, do you know? I think you're muted.
I'm not saying anything.
Oh, I thought you were. Does anybody have any ideas along that line in all the various Pacifica stations? Are there certain individuals that are engaged in news from that station? Some kind of news program?
It's
Go
pretty.
ahead.
It's pretty chaotic right now. I can just tell you that.
Yeah, Madam
But
Chair.
they exist, but that's that's why I say somebody's gotta make phone calls and find out.
Okay, all right, that's good.
All right,
No
Madam Chair, in New
Go
York,
ahead.
New York. it's
And
called the-
Ursula knows a lot about who's doing what at the affiliates.
No,
Probably
exactly.
more
We're
than
going to go
anybody.
to Ursula. Absolutely. Go ahead, Jim.
In New York, it's Paul DiRienzo and Linda.
Okay. So do we have anybody, for example, at KPFK? Grace
Not really.
or Ally? Yeah, sorry. We don't. Okay. All right. Well, for example, would you know of somebody at KPFK who would be interested in that, to participate in some kind of national news initiative?
Not at this time. We just don't have the staffing. The little staffing we have is just dedicated to trying to keep ourselves alive.
Well, even volunteers.
We have almost no volunteers.
I see. Okay. All right. So what about any of the other stations? WPFW.
Well, Sue Goodwin,
Okay, good. Yeah,
I mean, person, you
sense.
know,
right.
Yeah. we
Exactly.
have another person, Chris Bangert Drowns. So it's a small team right now.
Okay. So Ursula, what do you want to add to this?
I'm just listening right now.
Okay.
I
Well,
mean,
go ahead.
yeah,
Before-
I
well,
mean,
let me just say, before you got on, we were talking about having some kind of national network of folks in all the various stations to work on a national news program, but go ahead. But everybody acknowledges the fact that there's quite a bit of news entities within the affiliate network. Could you add to anything along that line? Are there certain individuals that are engaged in news in their local areas?
yeah, I mean, I think there's all sorts of things happening in many, many different ways. You know, some of our affiliates, some of the older ones that are the more traditional stations who get CPB funding, some of those have news departments and news directors. And a lot of stations are just kind of trying to, you know, figure out how to do it, like as much as what's happening at the Pacifica stations right now, trying to figure out how to make it work, you know, how to use whatever resources they have to do some sort of news. Some stations are able to do it, some aren't. We did a survey a little while back, kind of asking people about their interest in news directors. There's always, you know, there's always interest in developing local news. But it's, you know, as with everybody else in community radio, unless you're a CPB funded station, it's a struggle to figure out how to do it. It's a matter of resources, right? One of the things we were thinking of developing was to do like an online news training program where we would help affiliates recruit community members, you know, because they were interested in learning street journalism, to maybe do outreach in a way to help people enlist people who are interested in doing news. And then kind of, I mean, every station kind of has to figure out what capacity they have and how to make that happen. You know, it's very individual. There's very few stations other than the CPB funded stations actually can hire news directors. So it's difficult.
Right, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Egberto what his thoughts are about this issue.
Well, what I've been saying for a while is that I do think, I don't think we have to, I don't think it has to be, or let me back up. I think if we're trying to keep the Walter Cronkite model that everybody does, that it probably takes a bit. I think if we try our own model, which is, I look at other programs. I look at let's say what you did, Jim, with the Ukraine thing that you do, and what other people do, what I do with politics and right, what other people do with these things. I don't think we have the money to do our own big time reporting. I think we have to concentrate more on crowdfunding. At KPFT, I started to look for young people in the community who want to just go out there and bring stuff to us. And then the idea behind it when we get restarted is to package that for, as news programs, just crowdsourcing as opposed to the official way that news is all, normally done. I just think we have to do it outside of the box. But, when I hear a lot of things, I hear a lot of us doing, again, using a model that has always been used. And I don't think we can afford that.
Heather, Jim to the stack.
Yeah, so just before we go to you, Jim, I just want to ask everyone. So the consensus is, I guess, if we're going to have a news program or having individuals engaged in this, these people have to be paid. Is that correct? So that's one of the things I'd like to hear from folks as we have this discussion. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, obviously it would be great if we could. Yeah, go on, Egberto.
Yeah, that's what look. That is where I believe in paying folks and all of that, depending on the situation. But right now, that isn't in my humble opinion, that isn't a possibility. about paying and all that sort of stuff. And if courts crowdsourcing is a model that people use now, right? And find alternative ways to monetize that on an individual basis. I think if we're looking for that central thing to pay, I just don't see us ever being able to do that in the short term because it has so completely changed. As an example, I don't think we are going to be getting much more out of on air because personally here in Houston, I don't see how we grow. The FM is great to have, but I don't see how we grow a listenership when folks aren't sitting down in a car anymore listening to a radio. You know, the radio may be sort of an alternative, but from where the growth is going to come from, it's not going to come from on air, in my humble opinion. And that's why I'm saying we have to think outside of the box for doing what we're doing. And I think, we can get started on this actually immediately. I mean, I've been doing some tests, and I think Jim has been doing some tests as well with using the different sources, all the different media sources that they have to start bringing traction. And I think we can actually start doing that tomorrow. But, we have a tendency not to work in that modality.
So I agree with so much of what you said, Alberto. So Jim, you had a comment.
Let
Go ahead.
Donna go ahead of me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see Donna. Go ahead, Donna.
Yeah, I was just thinking, we've been discussing at PFW, just trying to pull together. We have a good number of public affairs programs. And so I think I have to agree that on air, I don't think anybody has the time for that right now. And I don't think we have the money to pay a news director, but we do have really good public affairs programs, and we can pull snippets from several of those. I mean, on a weekly basis. I think that to me seems very viable.
That's a good idea. It seems to me. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
This is Grace.
I'm
Grace
sorry.
for the SAC.
Grace, just a sec. Did I interrupt you?
Sure,
there?
sure.
Did you have something else you wanted to add?
No, I'm finished. That was
okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, Grace, go ahead, and then to Jim Dingman. Go ahead.
Yeah, my concept was not necessarily news. News has to be up to the minute, and the thought that I had about having people submit 7 minutes or whatever number works per unit wouldn't necessarily work for straight news, but it would work for public affairs. That is a little bit more evergreen, that has more shelf life to it. I think it would work really well. But yeah, there could be some buy-in to it, but I think all of our programs, all of our stations produce some great programming, and a 7-minute a week example or sample from each station, I think would be really good.
Okay, it sounds good. Go ahead, Jim.
All right. Well, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about how the hell do we increase our weekly cumes immediately? How do we do that? How do we jump them? One way to do this, I think, is to, let's say you have a news department, and the news department could be reinforced. We could research in each local metro market what are the best, essentially, local news podcasts going on. Because there's a lot of that's underway. A lot of that's underway in all the different metro markets we're in. And then we could reach out to these folks and say, look, can we, include you, advertise as a supplement to what we're doing for people to listen to? I mean, the question of monetizing it, I wouldn't bring up at this point. I would just simply try to diversify our local news things. Because one of the things I remember hearing at the Knights Ritter Conference down in Florida a couple of last year was there was a podcast done by a bunch of African-American women in Chicago that had gotten a lot of support, and and it was basically like a local news reportage on everything, including politics, but culture, everything like that. So that's one way to supplement our local news immediately. Second of all, now Ursula's raised the question of training. I think the training issue is extremely important. we could also start to do that now. We could do it in some way where we, in terms of, like, I know Ursula was talking about bringing in different folks who have been news directors. I think Ursula could fill it in what she was thinking of. But, basically say here are modules that you can teach yourself. And I'm thinking of the stuff that the BBC does or NPR puts up to train, community radio people. There's a lot of good, websites they have, and I know where they are. Accumulate them and say, look, we'd like you to, join us and do local reporting, that whole citizen reporting stuff. But important is the training issue, because the training issue, in my experience, was if somebody's taught how to cut and create a 3-minute piece or 4-minute piece, that person is a very good public affairs producer, because that person knows how to organize segments well, as opposed to somebody who doesn't have that experience. So I'm just thinking about ways we could immediately get a bang for the buck right away. We just have to reorganize and rethink. And I'm now talking about the weaker stations, the stations that are under, fiscal problems. I'm thinking also of, like, how to rebrand them. Like, here's the new KPFT, here's the new KPFK, here's the new WBAI. Something different than what normally we get all this terrible PR from when I look at the straight press. But those are things that just pop in my mind that we could do immediately. That we could, hey, we're here, we're back, we got something new going on.
All right, thanks, Jim. I mean, so now as far as, hold on a sec, as far as starting something immediately. So how do we do that? How do we start this immediately, everybody? What can we do? We can talk about this stuff forever, but I know we need to come up with steps to actually accomplish something. So what are the ideas on how we move forward on this if we want to do this immediately? And I think that under the circumstances with some of the financial challenges we have, this makes it probably a little bit more difficult, but I think it's quite possible that we can do this if we want to do it. So who wants to suggest a way we move forward on this? Anybody?
Okay, can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead, Egberto, because you were the one who also said that we could do it now, right?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
right. That's why I said, can I say something? Okay, the first thing I would do is whoever is going to be, that maybe that we assign somebody, or not, I don't want to say assign, but if we're going to have this, let's say this national network, assign somebody to create our Pacifica channel on every single social platform that we're going to support. We can do that right away, right? In other words, establish a YouTube account, a Facebook account, Facebook page, a Instagram page, a TikTok page. Establish each one of those accounts, right? Then we have tools that we can say, all right, when we talk about creating little segments, I've been experimenting using TikTok to create 1 minute, 1 minute rants. In our case, it would be 1 minute rant specific to tailored to our, to what we do. And these are things to just get those channels primed while we formalize things. As long as there's something to prime all these channels, put something on these channels so that when we, have all these things officiated, it is there standing and waiting. But if you don't start, you don't start. So that's one of the first things that I would do. Create a channel on these guys and start populating it with little 1 minute things. I mean, like I said, somebody said earlier, there are a lot of snippets out there of good material from a lot of our stations that we can get somebody to take out little snippets of things to put out there. And it's not, it's something that I do on a daily basis for Politics Done Right. And I can see it being done for a lot of other programs out there to do as well.
Okay, thanks for that, Egberto. And before we go, we have Don. Don, is your hand still up? It's up there, but I don't know. Did you want to speak?
I put it back up. I was just going to say, if we want to start immediately, and I think, Egberto, those are good suggestions. Hadn't thought about that, social media channels, but that's very good. So we'll be ready to go. To me, in terms of capacity for WPFW, only thing I can see us doing right now immediately would be to try to pull from what we are producing or what is being produced already.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes
I
sense.
agree, but there's
Yeah.
a lot of good stuff that's, I mean, I listen to some shows, sorry for interjecting, but I just, since you brought that up, we at KPFT, we pick up shows from all of you all, right? And letters and politics and all of that. There are 1 minute segments and those things that are impressive. You know, you put a trailer on it and a little something and you throw it up on a card and it sounds great.
So thanks for that, Alberto. I'm going to go to Jim and Ursula in just a moment, but do we have an individual within our network who we can ask to do this? Or is there anybody here in the committee that would want to do it? So that's something to think about. I'd like to hear from folks about that. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, Alberto knows, I know Alberto is able to set up his show to simultaneously go on all these different venues. And one of the aspects of this that's very important is that we have the opportunity, if we start doing this now, I think we should immediately have as our objective to reach out to Generation Z people to bring them in immediately because they're using the social media anyway. And, I wouldn't want to listen to what they think is important, and say, look, we want you guys to be collaborating with us from the get. You're our equals. What do you think of? What do you come up with? And I know that I've talked about this with Egberto. I've talked about this with Otis. I've talked about this with Grace's husband. I want to go up on Twitter Space and start messing around up there because, as I mentioned, I had two friends of mine about 3 months ago as the Ukraine war began, and they got up there. One of them had, they're specialists in Russia. They had 250,000 people listening to them in 1 hour. Now, I don't have to tell you, I don't think Democracy Now! Throughout the whole country has, I could be wrong, but in all different markets, Amy's, and maybe she has about that many, but that was amazing to me. And we could do things like on Twitter Space where we could mix it up. We could get different public affairs. Now, I'm not talking about public affairs now, so to me that's a little different because the public affairs shows in general, at least in New York, they don't make any goddamn money. So that's a whole separate question to deal with. But I'm talking now about breaking news. We could get a whole bunch of producers who are working together and collaborating around the country. My forte is international news, but of course I'm paying attention to domestic news, and I have pretty good experience in Africa, the Middle East, Asia. I mean, I spent years doing that kind of stuff for print outlets and worked in television on it. So that would be something I would like to work with other people on. But we could go up on Twitter Space and start messing around and say, here's the Pacifica Twitter Space, and we could do something that's not being done in the local stations. That is, because we can't fight our way into the 168-hour grid a week. But we can do stuff up there that they're not doing it right now on the grids, and that I think would be where we take advantage of digitization, just exploit the hell out of it, and do things differently up there as opposed to do the traditional things we normally do that we know don't have many people listening anyway.
If I may add, I think your Ukraine stuff is actually perfect and ready for Twitter Space.
Oh yeah, I agree. We're thinking about how to do it, but the stuff I was doing with Otis, before he left me. Anyway, that stuff, that was just a model of how we could do stuff because there's all these incredible coverage internationally of all sorts of news stories that are not repeated in the American media. I mean, we all know that. I mean, all the different, not even the Europeans, let alone the state-run stuff like Telsur or RT. I mean, you can take that with a grain of salt, but there's all these different media outlets that cover parts of the world in greater detail than any American outlet does. And so that's, to me, another jump-off point to explore. Like, for example, let's go into detail about Sri Lanka. And for 2 hours, we could talk about Sri Lanka, bring people in, because Twitter, as we know, certain people, Twitter sort of has a cachet to bring in sort of policy wonks or news people. But yeah, Berto, I'm down with that. I think we should exploit the hell out of Twitter.
Jim, we're going to go to Ursula. So thank you. Go ahead, Ursula. I think you're muted. You're muted still.
Sorry. It's great hearing, the energy and the interest in all this. I do think that, you know, Heather, you or whoever works with you, it would be really good if you, let me see, it's just like, you know, one of the ways that I see that a lot of energy get lost at Pacifica is that there's people are always kind of branching off on their own and starting new initiatives without really checking in with what already exists and how things are already working together and working to build that up so that Pacifica actually, as an organization, builds some strength instead of constantly diffusing it. So you know, I think, you know, the social media ideas are great, but I know that there's also certain initiatives already going on at stations and at the affiliate network unit. And I'm not saying, you know, there's not a lot of room for improvement, but it seems to me like a really good first step would be to to have somebody really call each unit and find out what they are actually doing now, and then come up with a plan that integrates what people are doing, or you know, or not, or you know, figures out how to do it without canceling each other out, you know, so that the plans are really built to, you know, build strength of everybody in the organization, and doesn't kind of have a fracturing effect again. And because, you know, from the, you know, people on the outside of Pacifica, they see it as one entity and they expect it to have a brand and a message and a certain, you know, coherence. And so I'm just saying, you know, I feel like it's very exciting that you're making plans. I think that there should be a distinction made between short-term plans and long-term plans, so that, you know, long-term plans can be built carefully, so that something can really be built up. And that really a first step is to find out what is actually already happening, what kind of a presence we already have, and how to, you know, how to integrate things. That's it. I'm done.
Thank you, Ursula. So who is this? Janine, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to ask, I'm at KPFK on a couple of committees there, and I used to be secretary. And Ziri Rideau is an LSB member who has journalism background, and she, from what I understand, she has already talked to Stephanie, the ED, about a news program proposal that she has. And I know that last week she had a call to try to brainstorm with everybody about how to do it. And I think it is probably just for KPFK, but it could be duplicated at the other stations. And I think it involves students, training students to do news coverage and edit and all that sort of thing. And I know that Allie has something going on with the, I haven't listened to it yet, but last week there was a news program with the Cal State LA students covering the area that school is in, East LA, Southeast LA. And I'm just wondering, for the same thing that Ursula is talking about, it seems like people are doing things in different directions. And you know, for something like this, I don't see Ziri here, and I'm just curious what is going on with her program where it's not being, what about it is not appealing on a national level or on the level of the KPFK? Because we have somebody, you know, you're asking if somebody's willing to spearhead it, and here we have somebody who's already put together a proposal, willing to spearhead it, and yet it's not being incorporated in the brainstorming that's going on a national level. So that question is to Ali or anyone else. I know Grace was on that call last week. I'm just curious, like, what about that? Why is that not being adopted? Thank you.
Information.
Just a sec, Jim. Janine, I just want you to know that Ziri contacted me. She was not able to join the meeting tonight, so I just wanted you to know that she's still very much a part of this. So.
Great, thank you.
No problem. So Jim, we've got, who is this? The BG, who is that?
Bruce
Oh,
Gray.
Bruce, go ahead, Bruce. Bruce,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
no problem.
I guess I'm gonna be the guy to throw cold water on the fire or whatever, but in terms of programming, I think everybody agrees that job one is to build audience. And I think before we go and invest a lot of resources and energy into this, we should go back and find out, whether our listeners would really be interested in listening to it. I mean, you can still go and do it, but we have 16 million people in New York. How many people out of the 16 million would be interested in another news program? How many people are really? We're all political junkies, so I mean, it's kind of like an addict looking at a bag of dope, and his eyes, he starts to salivate. But is that really going to bring us listeners? So I think we need to be careful and go back to the market research that Grace was talking about, and maybe a program about student loans or a veterans program about they're trying to take the VA apart. Would generate a lot more listeners at this juncture when we need to double or triple the audience. That's it. I'm done.
Thanks, Bruce. So go ahead, Jim.
Well, Bruce is right. I think, and just to answer Janine, Ziri is completely involved with what we're doing, Janine. She just wasn't here today. Although there are
Hands up too.
Yeah, I see, Ellie. And there's are differences in our approach because I'm not somebody, for example, who is a anti-vaxxer. Ziri is. So we're having an argument about that, and we sort of felt like, okay, we got a big tent. So if somebody wants to go in that direction, okay, fine. That's not my thing. I'm not one of those kind of people, but different strokes for different folks. We're not talking about a national thing because we get a lot of talent around the country.
I just want to object to that. She's not an anti-vaxxer. I think she's someone who
All right, Janine,
believes that people should have the right to decide. She
All right.
said that so much on the meeting.
Chair, this is out of order.
Yes,
Crosstalk.
Yeah, Janine,
Yes.
okay, yeah, and yes, we've argued about this, and our differences have been resolved, Janine. But anyway, we have a lot of talent throughout the whole country. That's what we sort of saw in that first meeting. We had people who weren't even involved with Pacifica coming in here, people who have worked in all parts of the world. So there's all these people that we can bring in and mobilize, and we have a lot of different people to come in and do this kind of work. So, and yes, with Ursula, yes, we don't want to reduplicate things, but at the same time, we don't want to be constrained because, again, we're dealing with a situation where we have a practical reality of all the stations have lost tremendous amounts of their audience, and what we're trying to think out loud is things to jumpstart the situation right now. And, it may work, may not work, but that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out ways we can immediately jumpstart and try to increase audience right away and do things that we normally don't do. That's what the purpose of this kind of debate is in terms of implementation. And yeah, I'd be, he's, Egberto's right about that. At this point, we're starting to take that Ukraine stuff I've been doing and do it in a different way. But then, of course, you have what Ursula has going on in the out there in Rhode Island or Massachusetts. This woman who's bringing in people directly from Ukraine. And I should add that the one thing I'm trying to make sure we do in covering international affairs is to make sure there's a difference of opinion. Because too often shows either, news shows will substitute their allegiances ideologically to whatever kind of Marxist, Leninist, revolutionary nationalist dicta they want to think is, quote, progressive news. And then that, of course, narrowcasts us. So I'm trying to avoid that as much as possible.
Jim, your time is up.
Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Ali. And let me just mention before we go to Ali, and I know we have a few hands up here, but we agreed that we wanted to have some kind of national news entity. And what we really need to talk about also is the steps on how to move forward with this. How do we do this? So anyway, go ahead, Ali.
Well, I was waiting till we had new items or announcements to talk about this, but since it's been mentioned, I will put this out there.
Go ahead.
We recently launched the Cal State LA Community News Hour, and this is a news and public affairs show that's produced and hosted by students of the journalism and broadcasting department at Cal State LA, covering local stories of Los Angeles, East Los Angeles, South Los Angeles, and West Los Angeles. And it's taken almost a year to get this to the air. The problem is when you're working with students, you find students that are interested and they do great work. And then the next semester they're gone and you're starting all over again. So it takes, as Otis said, you need someone that's a point person that's constantly going to be refilling the source so that you have this going on. And another thing is almost all decent universities and colleges have their own radio stations now and online stations. So there's not a great attraction for students to come and give extra work for some of the Pacific stations, which, quite bluntly, none of the students had even heard of us. So they're already doing stories. They're already all over social media. We're very lucky to have this local news program. Something that people have been screaming for ages is to have local news. And this is a start at KPFK to do that, but it's a lot of work. It doesn't come easily. And there's not a great attraction for students to come and do this for us. So we're very grateful that they're doing it. But I know that in 3 months, we're going to have to start harvesting interest in the next batch of students and see who's going to be willing to continue this on. But I did want to make an announcement about that we have this community news program on the air now, and we're very excited about it. As far as Ziri's thing goes, yeah, it's whenever she's ready to present something, we're very eager to listen to it. As at this point, all we've heard is descriptions and talk. So hopefully she'll be able to put something together at some point.
Oh, that's great, Ali. Thank you. Thanks for that. All right, Alberto, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to there's something that Ursula said that I really understand, and that is about Pacifica branding and having things look like it goes in a lot of other directions. And then I think she said that there's a whole lot of other stations doing other things, and we maybe jump in the boat or whatever. Maybe what we then need is somebody to aggregate what is going on and bring it forward. Now, listening to what Bruce said, Bruce talked about doing the market analysis to see what people really want. That's another important point. And actually, that is why I like social media. I personally would love if we stop thinking about Pacifica as these 5 on-air station, meaning in the wave station, and think about it in a bifurcated way, in 2 ways, actually. One is just programming and the totality of all the programmings that you can have. And in our environment, you can have an infinite amount of programming and see which ones win out, right? That's programming. And then the mediums in which the programming go out. In other words, our programming would have the on-air version for those people. Mostly it's going to be the older folk that want to listen to stuff on the radio, and all the other forms of transmission. In other words, we have the product, and it's how do we deliver the product on what means. As an example, in social on Twitter Spaces, Dingman comes out with his Ukraine things. If that takes off, hey, great. We can see how that can be then placed onto other mediums. I have certain things on TikTok, whatever. If that takes, great. So, I mean, I don't see things as subtractive, but more additive if we kind of bifurcate and think about it as laissez-faire in one way, but organized as as programming using different forms of mediums. I don't know if that was kind of clear or not, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I think we have to stop thinking of ourselves as radio stations, because I don't know. I honestly don't see us I don't see how we get new listeners on a per air channel basis, but I can see how we can bring folks to our programming in whatever avenue we choose to put those programmings on. Thanks.
Oh, thanks, Alberto. Okay. All right, Janine, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm sorry that I interrupted. I just, I think there's a big difference between somebody who's an anti-vax person and there's someone who believes that there should be choice that is against the mandates. I think that's a big difference. And I just think it needed to be corrected. I don't want to speak for Zeri on that, but and so I wanted to just follow up with what I heard from Ali, which is when she brings something to us, because my understanding is that she brought a proposal, a thought out proposal to the ED. I could be wrong, but what would it be? What would green light? What is needed in order to green light something for the station? Is it more than a proposal? Does it actually have to be a produced piece in order to say yes? Or what is it exactly? What are the steps?
I'm sorry, Janine. Yes, I agree. We need to talk about what the steps are altogether. That's one of the things I'm trying to figure out here tonight as well. And we need to have more of a discussion about that. We have Jim.
I'm sorry. I'm not saying I'm trying to be very specific because it seems like someone did what they thought was necessary in order to get approval, and yet it didn't get approval. So it's not, so what I'm looking for from Ali, I mean, this is really an honest question about what is the next step when he says that she needs to present something. What exactly is that presentation?
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to let Ali. Ali, did you want to respond?
This is not what we're talking about at this meeting. We haven't seen a proposal. She went and met with that crazy guy, what was his name, Greg. We haven't seen anything from her. This meeting isn't about how to present a show for consideration for airing. This meeting is about the items on the agenda. Okay.
Okay, well, thanks.
Try and stay on the topic.
All right, no problem. All right, so we have Jane Dingman on, but Jim, before we go to you, I just want to ask Otis, do you have anything you want to share of what we've heard so far? He is co-host, actually.
Well, I'm hearing a lot. I think that the bottom line that has been mentioned by 3 or 4 people is you're going to have somebody to pull it together.
Exactly.
You know, the danger is when the actual doing becomes an abstraction. Well, we just got somebody to do all this, you know. That's sort of where the rubber meets the road. And in order to produce something and actually put it on the air, you have to have the rubber meeting the road. And the other thing is, and I think this was said by a couple of other people, we don't want to form what the show is. Like, you know, it could be any number of things. And part of that comes from the actual development process. I think it was Ursula mentioned that, you know, might not be hard news. Or no, Grace said that. It might not be hard news. But it would be interesting to hear, I think, what's going on around the country. I have a particular interest in Roe versus Wade because that's a particular issue that is going to be different in different states. There are different things that are going to have to happen in different places. It'd be really interesting to know what people are doing in different places to deal with that, you know, specific issue. But that's just one thing. But I don't think we want to say, well, this is what the show has to be, or, you know, really talk about that. I think that the most important thing to get out of this is there can we get a structure going that might move it to the next level? Is there, you know, can we somehow Shanghai somebody and, you know, chain them to the desk and start to actually assemble what we're talking about? It ceases being abstract when you get down to actually doing it. And I think that I want to just kind of suggest that that's where we want to head.
Thanks for that, Otis. I'm inclined to agree, actually. All right, so we have Jim on. Go ahead, Jim.
All right. Well,
Heather, Heather, do you see my hand up? This is Kim.
Yes, I see, but you're on the list there. I'm coming to you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Jim.
All right. Well, one thing I'm going to be doing in the next few weeks is I'm going to be dealing with lapsed donors in New York. And this is something I haven't done in a while. Actually, for about that last time I did this was about 6 years ago when we had about 6,000 people we had to deal with. And one of the purposes of those phone calls will indeed be to do market research because I'm interested to hear what they have to say about what they think is right and what they think is wrong in terms of what's going on in New York and why they're not giving money. And that's a particular type of listener. Now, in terms of what Otis is talking about, the analog is one thing, okay? That has its own trajectory to do, quote, produce either a, quote, national show with voluntary participation of various units in it, or to produce different daily segments, which I think would also be important to be able to use for reinforcing local shows, or to do commentary. The reason I bring that up is Tom Voorhees mentioned to me when he was growing up at KPFA, he would listen to the commentary stuff that KPFA did. And that was all across the board, by the way. That was where Cap Weinberger was part of the commentary team. So my problem all the time is why are we always restricted to trying to outdo ourselves as to who's more revolutionary to be heard on the air? That has nothing to do with the way Pacifica developed in the first decades of its evolution until the 60s. And again, what I'm talking about is digital forms that didn't exist. So that's what I'm talking about. Okay, local podcasts, boom. There must be local news podcasts in New York I'm totally unaware of. Let's have them collaborate and we can incorporate them as, quote, news. The kind of stuff I'm doing or Berto's doing, people can have that as a choice to listen to. I'm not saying to usurp anything. That can be done immediately, frankly. And then people can say they think it stinks or they don't. But we're not asking for any money. We're not asking for this. Again, the question of how to vector money to the station so it's financial plus is another issue. And the last thing to say is, yeah, we have to figure out how to do this with no resources at all. That's the problem. I do agree, though, that someone has to be the grand over orchestrator, but then that's where we get into problems. Who's going to dictate the content and call the shots editorially? And that can be a big battle that can bog down. We have to be very flexible and allow a lot of people, we ought to let 1,000 flowers bloom in an effort like this. Thanks.
I'd like to answer that. I just want to say, one of the things that happens when you produce is, one of the things you do when you're producing is you discover what your resources are. And to a great extent in something like this, the resources are likely to determine the content of the show. And I think that for the most part, people who do that kind of producing are not really interested in being a gatekeeper unless something is really awful or absolutely unusable.
Let me just add to that. We have stations in the network that I understand subscribe to Reuters. KPFA has far more resources than the other stations, and this is why I'm disappointed we don't have anybody from KPFA today, because they have resources they subscribe to that they could share with us. Anyway, and make the efforts more fruitful and more nuanced. There, Heather?
All right, I'm just going to go. I don't know what the list was. I think Kim was next, and then Ali, and then Ursula, but I'm not sure that was the. I think Kim, go ahead. We haven't heard from you.
Yep, that's true. Thank you, Otis. I just want to say that in terms of Ziri's idea or anyone else's idea, I have not seen any proposal. And a paragraph or two of intention to do something is not a proposal. As Otis has said, you need actually, who is going to be coordinating this? Who is going to do what? What is your budget? And there is going to need to be a budget. You are going to need to engage staff and paid programmers somewhere along the line. And all of that is what really needs to go into an actual proposal. Like who's doing what and how much is it going to cost? Spoken as the treasurer here. That's it. Thank you.
Again, my response to that is yes. My tendency is to say if Kim says something about money, you better listen. On the other hand, if there's somebody who wants to take this on, and it's not a job like this is not a reward. You will never, it is thankless because you're just going to make a bunch of enemies. Because, you know, but if you put something like this together and you start finding out what your resources are, a lot of the shape of the actual project begins to appear. I don't believe in developing projects in a top-down way, particularly in community radio. I think we do it from a, you know, we get a nut of an idea. Here somehow we want communication from all over the country in a way we could present it. And there are a couple of interesting things about it. Social media, big change. I don't know anything about it like Berto does. But a lot of what Kim's referring to, I think, comes out of the actual finding out what you've got to work with and you know, what kind of stuff is possible. Reports of that become proposals. I really want to avoid the idea of somehow somebody's a boss, you know, and he's going to be a gatekeeper, and we got to have a lot of structure about that, and everybody's got to have something to say. That's one way to absolutely have the project die. Ultimately, you're going to have one person, probably, maybe a couple, who are organizing this, and out of that process comes the shape of the project. So the doing is actually what makes it happen, not the talking about it. So the issue here is finding, you know, who wants to take that on, who feels they can.
That's absolutely right, Otis. All right, so
okay,
Ursula?
you're that. So that was okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
No problem. Go ahead, Ursula.
Well, I'd like to make a suggestion that since this is a committee of the board, that I think that something that would be of great value and of use to everybody is if this committee did create some sort of questionnaire. And, you know, there's so many good ideas here that have been put in a meeting like this to, you know, to address some of the ideas and find out what actually exists already in the network. And just so that we get an image of what we really have to work with for starters. And I think that would be a really great first step, just to get an understanding of what's happening now, because I think we'll discover resources and we'll also, you know, lend morale to people who are I mean, everybody in the network is suffering from terribly low morale by now because they feel completely unseen by the board, and this would be a great antidote to that. And so that's a recommendation I would make as a first step for the committee. Also, just two other quick things. One is that you know, I agree in what you were saying, Egberto, and I just kind of want to remind everybody here that in many ways, this idea of working together as a network is a concept that for the majority of the people in the networks, which is really non-Pacifica stations, that concept has been real since 2005. I mean, you know, when AudioPort was created, it completely reconfigured how everybody in the network related. And people have been collaborating for almost 20 years now on exactly that concept, that it's a network that is contributing content all the time to AudioPort. And so that concept does exist among the affiliates already. And is, you know, is a very powerful template because it's an incredibly cooperative culture that is developed around that. And the last thing I want to say is kind of, you know, a next step for that. I mean, we're in the process of building a podcast host with the idea that when this thing, can start to really be used, that it would be a destination for community grassroots podcasts that's really curated and branded as such. And so I think that's that, when that is able to go live, that will be another option for us to develop programming, because right now we're approached by an average of 3 or 4 podcasters a week to put their content in AudioPort. So we're already receiving tons of content from podcasters. And if we create a podcast host, or when we do, then that will just create another step in this process that we're all talking about. The only reason it's not happening right now is for lack of money. We can't afford a few things that we need to finish the website, but I'm just saying, that's another platform that we'll be able to offer to this whole process of bringing everybody together.
Wonderful, Ursula. Thank you. Now, Kim, your hand is still up. I think that you're finished, right?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'll
No
put
problem.
it down.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ali. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear Ursula's announcement about AudioPort becoming a podcast host. What I wanted to announce is that at KPFK, what I've done over the last 3 weeks, and this goes along with what Jim Dingman was saying a little earlier, is I've sent out announcements to all the programmers that have podcasts that we host, or actually Otis hosts them, all of our podcasts. And I have submitted and entered over 80 different shows to Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, to make sure that all of these shows are now reaching new audiences through these other platforms and portals. And once we figure out how we can monetize podcasts, or maybe get donations through podcasts, hopefully these shows have built up their podcast subscriber base. And once AudioPort is able to host them, we'd be glad to move the local sources to AudioPort. But this is something I think every station should be doing with their podcasts, is getting them just not on their own podcast page, but onto these other portals like iHeart, Spotify, and all these other aggregators, so that people will find our programming that have never heard of Pacifica or KPFK or whatever station. So I encourage those that are in touch with their own tech people to look into. It's not hard to submit shows and get them on these aggregators, but you have to go through the process and put the podcast feed in and give a description and an image and so forth, so that it'll come up in people's searches. So that's another thing I think we should all be looking to encourage. As we've heard here, we have to really think away from terrestrial radio as our only output source. That's all.
Okay, thanks for that. You wanted to respond quickly, Ursula, but you're muted.
Just to be clear, Ali, thank you. But we're using the Otis's software for AudioPort, but actually the podcast website is going to be called Pacificaster, and you can see it if you go to pacificaster.org. You can see it.
Oh, that's great.
So it'll be a separate website because it's apples and oranges. And feel free to look at it if you want. It's in development right now. Our problem is we can't afford a lawyer, so we can't afford to make the contract that we need to go live with this thing. So as soon as we can find, if anybody knows any grants for this, please tell me, because we really need to finish it. And the other thing, I just want to make a cautionary note. I know that, you ran into this, and by the way, Pacificaster will, link to the big libraries like, Google Play and all those. So it won't be a dead end for people. It'll be, and also if they have podcasts on other locations with other hosts, they can auto-fill our website. So, people will have options. But just a cautionary note, which I think is something you ran into, Ali, right? Which is that when you link shows from your station to the big libraries, make sure that the host knows, because what can happen is, what happened there is that all of a sudden shows that didn't belong to KPFK showed up as KPFK. So it's just a cautionary note if people are going to do that.
Yeah, that's why I said I sent out a request and asking which shows wanted to be included.
Yeah,
And there are several that declined because they don't have the right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks, Ursula. So go ahead, Jim.
Well, Ollie, that's a great idea, and that, of course, I've been arguing about for like 20 years now. Could you make that a motion that we could agree upon? I think we'd have no disagreement about this. That be something that the foundation do as soon as possible with all the shows. Try to integrate them into all these different aggregators. I mean, just as you could come up with some wording that would just so we could get that passed today, because it's a no brainer for the foundation to do, and I think it would actually benefit everybody in general. Now, the other thing about this is that it raises something that happened a couple of years ago in New York at Columbia Journalism School when I was there, where Christopher Lydon was there. Christopher Lydon did one of the best PRA shows. Even some people in JUC agree with that, and he is widely considered the person where the term podcasting began. He was walking across the MIT campus, and they came up with the term back in the 90s. So what I'm thinking is that one of the things I suggested to him is, again, this gets into the training issue. Because when you train for podcasting, essentially you're training for highly skilled radio production. That's what a podcast, when it's well done, essentially is. So I was thinking I would call up Christopher Lydon, who is still cranking it out for PRI. He actually volunteered in the past to let his show be played on Pacifica. Nobody took him up on it. But I would call him up and say, look, Christopher, I talked to you a couple of years ago. Remember the conversation? I'd say, look, we're doing stuff now. We'd like you to come and help us. And so I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that for sure. I'm going to take advantage of this and do this and reach out to him because he's a pretty good guy, friendly to Pacifica, and very flexible. And again, he liked the idea of having in a radio station the ability to train any kid off the street to learn how to do podcasting. And you're right about that. You train these kids, they go off and they don't come back. But you know what? That's the name of the game. You never know if some kid walking through the door is going to be some grand genius in terms of audio production. It's worth, I think, taking that risk with everybody coming in. That's the name of the game. And I think if we are willing to do that and are set up to do that, it'll help us a lot.
Thanks, Jim. So, all right, Bruce, go ahead.
Yep. Okay. So first I want to back up Ali, what he said about working with college students, because we have a number of college radio stations here, but on Long Island, there are two, Nassau Community College, which, believe it or not, is better than the university, and then Hofstra University, which is WHUR. And both of them have student-run news desks, student shows, the usual music shows that a college station does. And they have the same problem. By the time the kids get to be a junior or senior and they know what they're doing, then they graduate and you got to start all over the freshman. And then you've got the year to year rotation. So, it really is a battle to try and keep current with the, with the incoming freshmen or whatever. The second thing is, are we going to spend the whole meeting on news? But don't answer that question. The third question is, I don't want to be a wet blanket here, but I think we're all talking about baking a cake, and well, honey, you've already got 3 on the shelf, so why are you making a new one? And this is going to be kind of labor intensive and energy intensive. And what I'm thinking is, if you go out to Audioport and you go and you look what's already in the can and ready to air from the affiliates, like news from Butte, Montana, or Bismarck, North Dakota, or whatever. I mean, Ursula's got a ton of stuff. You can call the show, news from places you've never heard of in the US or something like that. I mean, I think our energy at this point, limited as it is, needs to be concentrated on outreach and PR and programming, in the sense that it's going to grow the listenership. And this is going to be a lot of work and maybe not so many listeners. That's it, I'm done. Again, I don't mean to be a wet blanket. I think it's a wonderful idea, but I'm just wondering if, we should say, okay, fine, any 6 people who want to run with it, go. But as a as a network priority, we need to grow the listenership like within the next 2 months kind of thing. That's it. I'm done.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. We are spending the whole program tonight or the meeting tonight on the first item, which is to explore a news network, or news, whatever issues. But go ahead, Ali, go ahead.
Okay, I have a motion, but before I make the motion, I did also want to mention that the Cal State LA Community News Hour also satisfies part of KPFK's obligation for providing education and internship, and it is included in our current EEOC annual report. So it is serving several purposes. I don't know the name of the person that goes by the initials of BG who made the baking a cake analogy, but I want to thank him for being a breath of reality in this meeting. It's nice to have pie in the sky ideas, but we really have to assess what we have to work with, and that we need to keep Pacifica and the stations alive, or we won't have anywhere to do any of the things that we're planning. Here's my motion. I move that all Pacifica shows that have self-produced podcasts begin the process of submitting them to all public aggregators, such as iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, Stitcher, TuneIn, Google, etc. Can I get a second on that motion?
I second that.
Oh, thank you. So is there any opposition to it?
I just have a question.
Go ahead.
Is Pacificaster sort of the same as Buzzsprout, or one of these services that basically dishes out the podcast to all the iTunes and iHeart?
I don't know what Buzzsprout is. Pacificaster is going to be a host, will be a host. But we will also, provide an RSS feed for the large libraries. So people that put their shows in the website can choose to also have it go to the large libraries. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, actually, and it might be something that Ali wants to look at. I mean, Buzzsprout, and there are a couple of other ones, I think, is a service that basically, you give it the podcasts that you want, and it does the grunt work of dishing it out to iHeart's, iTunes, Stitcher, and all the rest of it. And the KPRN uses it. Nationally, as a network, we might want to investigate subscribing to that at whatever level, and it may just a lot less work than trying to do 80 podcasts yourself. That's it. I'm done.
Okay, thanks, Bruce. So I'm going to, did you change the wording some, Ali? No. Move that Pacifica programs that have self-produced podcasts. Who did that one? Is that you, Ali?
Actually, hold on a second. I'm going to take Buzzsprout out because Buzzsprout is different than an aggregator.
Okay, so would you read your motion again while you're looking at that, please?
Yeah, here's the final motion. I just put it in the chat. Move that Pacifica programs that have self-produced podcasts begin the process of submitting them to all public aggregators such as iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, Stitcher, TuneIn, Google, etc.
Excellent. So is there any opposition to this? Seeing no opposition.
I'm not a member, but I would like to say something.
Okay, go ahead.
That I think might pertain, that you might want to think about. One of my concerns about putting podcasts out to the world is one of the responsibilities for shows that are produced at Pacifica stations is to help support the Pacifica station. And so that kind of suggests that maybe of those shows, you want to have some mention that this show came from a Pacifica station, which is listener sponsored. Just a thought.
No, that absolutely makes sense. So we definitely want to promote Pacifica in this way. So,
well, I wonder how.
Can I respond?
Because Ali's really been working on this, so I really wonder what Ali's response is.
okay, go ahead, Ali. Go ahead.
So yes, absolutely, of course. The idea is to get these shows out there and start building up a subscriber base so that when we figure out how we can really monetize podcasting, they already have some listeners. What I've done in the case of all the shows I submitted is each show is named KPFK dash whatever the show is. So if you go to Spotify podcast and you type in KPFK, all of these shows that are going to come in the search results start with KPFK and then the name of the show. What I would encourage all the shows to do is to tag the beginning or the end of their show saying this free podcast is brought to you by the listener supporters of KPFA. If you'd like to support free speech radio, go to kpfa.org and make a donation. And
So
then the show would start.
Should that be a part of the motion?
I don't know. I mean, I wrote this motion at the encouragement of Jim Dingaman. I mean, if someone wants to make an amendment that they should have a header or Taylor attached, but then it starts to get more complicated. I mean, that's why the simplest idea I did was putting KPFK at the beginning of all the show titles. And a lot of the shows use the KPFK logo as the logo for their podcast. So
Let's hear what other people have to say about that then, Ali. We might want
I
to.
have some real concerns about it. I think there's a lot of legal issues and financial issues that it would be really good to sort out first before I don't know, and like, very quickly what happened to KPFK was exactly the problem, was that, shows went out that belonged to other people under the KPFK name. And it caused a lot of problems. There was some real upset, people were upset. And, and then you have your podcasters consider themselves on some level independent producers because they're making a podcast, and then the issue of monetization comes up, and without clear, I mean, this is why we're waiting too, because we need a lawyer to help us sort out what the legal boundaries are of, ownership of this kind of content and the monetization. And I'm not opposed, Jim and Ali, to what you're saying, but I'm saying to put a motion to ask everybody to do it right now. I think there are issues involved with branding, with money, with use of music, all sorts of things that need to be clarified before telling people to go out there and do this. I don't know. I think there's real issues to address.
Oh, thank you, Ursula. Okay, so go ahead, Jim.
Well, those are fair points, although of course this kind of discussion and procedures should have been discussed 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago. But
this is true.
And yes, I see that Ali put in the question about music programming, which of course is the DCMA. And yes, the motion just says begin the process, absolutely. And so all those issues you raise about the headers, very important. But, we're just trying to kick something off, and then we can, clean it up as we go along. We can't do music programming, unfortunately. I've been wanting to do that for a long time. But I'm just saying, all of us are at the national board level are very concerned about the stability of the whole operation, whether the whole damn thing's going to fall apart next week, 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, 8 weeks from now. So, what we're trying to do is get things in motion that can, if you put them all together, can start to keep that little ship from sinking. And this is one thing I think that we could do right today, and we can work it out. We can just let's put it out there and then let's work it out. Let's develop it. We'll, try to get it more together. But, I don't think we should wait. And all the things, of course, Ursula, these legal issues are very important to clarify. But I just think that we just should, get our act in gear here. And then we will take all those things in consideration as we proceed and work them out. Obviously, that's it's just obvious. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Go ahead, Otis.
No, I really don't have anything else to say. I think one of the dividing lines, again, you're distributing stuff, so you're in a whole copyright world. You're actually distributing with a podcast. That's why we can't do music, because we don't have the rights. So you have to, as Ursula said, you really have to be careful, and she's probably going into this as deeply as anybody because of the Pacificaster. You can't really put out somebody's syndicated show, you know, as though it were your own. You have to be careful. And I agree with Jim that we have to move ahead, but we don't want to move ahead in a way that could, you know, sort of backfire. It would be great to get a reading somehow on what podcasts would be okay to disseminate the way Ali's doing it, because some stuff has come up about that. So that, well, what are the considerations that we need to look at so that we could proceed to do what is best for Pacifica without getting in trouble? I don't know.
Point of information.
Hold on, we're going to go on to, hold on a sec, Jim. We've got other folks here. So
No,
thanks so much, Otis. Go ahead, Kim. You're muted. Okay.
Yeah, no, it takes me a minute to get to get there. What I was going to say was mostly covered by what Ursula said, and you know, I'm a kind of compliance wonk, and perhaps you could add a caveat on the end of this motion, providing that all legal issues have been, you know, settled, or something like that. I mean, this is a motion like to, I think it should be a motion to enter a conversation, not make it definitive, perhaps.
Okay. Enter a conversation about the issues presented, about the concept.
The legal and compliance, and you know, looking forward to like possible advertising, and what happens if people on their podcast are pushing their programming over to their website instead of us, and you know what are our parameters for Pacifica? What do we need to protect us and help us grow? A lot of people are doing podcasts because they want to push over, you know, they want to raise money for themselves.
Oh, okay.
And we got plug all over KPFK, you know, too. So this is a problem that really, you know, is bigger than just this conversation.
Okay, thanks.
All
All right, Bruce, go ahead.
I'm actually going to suggest that we scrap the motion and we encourage Ali to go ahead with what he's doing as a test bed, or the first prototype of a race car, which is running around the track without side panels or headlamps or anything, because I think it's a fantastic idea. And this would be an ideal way to get all these issues straightened out. Do we add an intro and outro? Do we put KBFK in the front of it? Do we encourage the show producers to, on the podcast, to say, okay, you're hearing the podcast, if you want to call in for the live show, it's every Wednesday at 10:30. I mean, I think it's an ideal opportunity to let Ali work on the second and third versions of the race car. And then when we've got these issues straightened out, then we can go and say, okay, here's a framework for the other stations to do it. Otherwise, you know, just throwing up a motion like this, they're all going to go in 6 different directions. I mean, I think it's a fantastic idea, and I think we should encourage them to continue to work on the race car, but without a motion. It's a pilot program. It's the first version, second version. Just keep going. We don't need headlamps. We don't need side panels to the car. It's a test model. That's it. I'm done.
All right, Ali, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, The motion just says begin the process of submitting them. So that could include looking into legal issues. Secondly, we are already podcasting all of the shows we're talking about. This isn't some unique special podcast only version that we're offering to host where they might be able to do plugging a product or something like that. This is stuff that's already airing, that we're already podcasting, that we're trying to grow an audience for. Finally, another point of this is if shows can grow a big enough of a podcast audience, if they need to be moved off the air to try a different program, there might not be any problem because they might have a bigger podcast audience than their terrestrial audience. In fact, we've had a couple of shows leave the airwaves because they have a very big podcast following. We have one show, IMRU, which is a LGBT show that has said to us now their podcast audience is much bigger and much more responsive than their on-air audience. So this motion is just saying start the process. It's not saying you have to do it. It's saying start thinking about it. These aren't unique programs. They're programs that are already airing, and we're already podcasting them on our own servers. We're just putting them in other portals so other people can find them. If you guys don't like the motion, vote it down. I only made the motion because Jim thought it might be an idea to give the other stations a nudge to look into this. That's it.
Thanks, Ellie. I do need to say to everyone, as you probably know, one of the reasons that community radio is struggling because there are so many other platforms out there now. And I personally think that joining those platforms is a good idea, but also to educate the public more about Pacifica Radio and community radio just generally. But all right, so go ahead, Jim.
Well, look, I've worked in commercial television.
Heather, this is
Yes,
James. I
yes.
don't know if you're watching the hands that are up on the,
No, I see you there. I've got you next.
okay, I'm just, since my hand has been up, I think Jim has spoken already.
He
Well,
has, that's true.
I
Good
want
point.
to this
Why don't you
point.
go ahead, Jim Sagerton, go ahead.
Let him go ahead. I just wanted to be sure you were watching.
No, I'm aware. I've got you right there.
Thank you.
So, all right, Jim.
All right,
Jim, go ahead.
I'm probably, I know there's other people who've worked in commercial media. I have, and I've worked in commercial media where we had to deal with rights issues. So these issues are easily handled. They should not be looked on as roadblocks. I would argue we go ahead with this motion and move on it. We can clean up all the other stuff later because we're not talking about, there's a time element here. I don't want to sit here. This is not 4 years ago. This is not 8 years ago. This is not 12 years ago. And we actually should have been thinking about these things. This is now. And so the legal issues are pretty clear to those of us who have background in this. They're not insurmountable. They should not be viewed as roadblocks to move forward on this. Everybody's going to be conscious of cleaning up these issues, and we just have to get this done now. And so I would urge that this motion be passed. I think it was unanimous anyway among those of us on the committee, and we just go ahead with it. It can be handled with lawyers as we develop it. Yes, there's all these imponderables. We're not talking about music podcasting. That's a whole other kettle of fish. But we just should get things going now. And this should have been, as I said, it should have been done 15 to 16 years ago, but it wasn't. So we're not talking about doing it now. And I just think we should move ahead. And we can deal with the legal stuff later. I'm probably one of the few people on this call who've been in meetings with lawyers about this for years and listened to them talk about this. So we can avoid any legal problems. We just have to be smart. Fair use still exists. And most of these public affairs shows are not sitting there playing, A Hard Day's Night on Cut or something like that, where they could get into problems with ASCAP or BMI. So I just say let's move ahead and start getting this stuff in gear now, not later, now.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to mention, Egberto, can you say something in this motion about when they're submitting their programs elsewhere that they mentioned that they are part of the Pacifica network? I think we already mentioned that to a degree, right?
Yeah, I mean, I use, as an example, all my my podcasts go to anchor.fm, which disperse them throughout to all the other platforms. And the shows that I do on Pacifica, it comes out and it says, coming from the studios of KPFT 90.1 FM. for the ones that I do daily on my show, it doesn't say that. So I mean, I'm already doing what Alexa, Ali has put out there. So I mean, I like the idea. I mean,
Thank you.
one of the
Egberto, let me go to Jim Sagerton. He's been on here for a while. We'll come
Okay,
back. to
sorry.
that. Go-
Okay.
No, that's good. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, thanks. And I didn't mean to step ahead of the other people. So about the contract for podcasting, we've got Melody Virtue, who is our FCC attorney, who replaced John Kriegler, who retired, who was our former FCC attorney, working on that. But of course, then the license renewals came up and we were distracted by that and had to pay for that. And then we were further distracted by a petition to deny WBAI's license, and that has cost us additional money and distracted us from the podcast contract. So we're getting distracted from it by these continuing costs. And when we talk about raising money and having a budget for a news program and, possibly hiring somebody as a point person, we have to remember that right now we're having trouble making payroll at several of our stations. We've got $600,000 in immediately due payables. We don't have money to do new things, which is, going to be the death of us eventually. But so if we could think about possibly doing some independent fundraising, or maybe the people who want to run this could try and raise some money amongst themselves or amongst, in their circles, that might be very helpful. I also want to comment on the nature of the contract that we're working up for podcasters. It's very, in my opinion, it's very liberal. It basically gives the podcasters the full right to do whatever they want to do with the podcast, but as long as it's under the Pacifica, the auspices of Pacifica, Pacifica would also have the full right to do whatever they want to do with the podcast. But that's a recognition of the reality that's been mentioned in part in some of these comments, that podcasters are out there with tens of thousands of subscribers, and we're offering them airtime, which maybe they can get a couple or few hundred more listeners, but it's not that significant to them overall. We also have some legacy sort of producers who perhaps haven't transitioned into podcasting on their own. One example is Leonard Lopate at WBAI, who is he was on WBAI many years ago. He went to NYC for a while. Now he's back. He's got a podcast. A few months ago, he hit his millionth download on his podcast. And he has given us the full rights to his podcast. So I would say one place where we could start with this project would be to find people like him who are either already have or are willing to give the full rights to Pacifica for their podcasts, and start there, and do what we need to do, running around the track without headlights or side panels, whatever else we need to do in that regard, with those things that we already have. And the other thing would be to, I think, perhaps run a survey, do a little outreach campaign to our producers and see who else might be willing to join that group that would be willing to give their podcast rights to Pacifica, with the understanding that Pacifica would help them to market them and develop them, and see if we can increase that number.
All right, Jim, thanks. So what does that mean as far as what we're doing with this motion?
Mike?
I might put something in it about, let's do that. Let's do what was described in the motion with the podcast that Pacifica already owns, and try to broaden that number by reaching out to other producers.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Jim Dingman.
Well, the whole purpose of the podcasting is, first of all, there's been this glib assumption by many Pacifica producers that if they create a podcast of their show, and since I'm one of the people who knows a lot about what actually is the amount of people listening to shows, I always laugh at that, because some of these shows don't have 300 or 400 people. Now maybe if they have a visibility through podcasting, that's where the issue of podcasting may indeed help them. because it'll make their content visible to other people who normally are not listening to Pacifica. And so that would be a reason to move ahead on this right now, because first of all, we're not talking about something that's going to be instantly done anyway, but we got to get the wheels churning on this. And, the legal aspects of this are pretty clear. I've had to deal with the networks. I used to have to deal with ABC and CBS News when I was doing a show for Free Speech TV to get permissions. And I would go meet with their news directors, their news departments to use their segments. And it was fair use was up to, a couple of minutes. Everybody doing these public affairs shows in the network know these kind of things. They can certainly be refreshed in their memory about what is fair use in the podcast world. But it should not be a reason to stop a process like this going on from this meeting. We can certainly discover and get people in all the local markets who are attached to law schools. We could probably even go to the Electronic Frontier Foundation and ask them to give briefs. I mean, there's all these people who would be willing to help us. But I don't think it should stop us from moving forward and getting this motion passed today and get the wheels underway, because it's only to our advantage to have the possibility of shows that basically have nobody listening to them at all, have somebody, oh my God, I didn't know this kind of show was there. That's the possibility of the podcast world. But, I just think we should not hesitate. We should move forward rapidly.
All right, so thanks for that, Jim. So my question is, there were some questions brought up about some of the legal issues here. Have we addressed that? I mean, is this going to be problematic for us to pass this motion? Are we going to get sued by anyone?
No, we're not, because we're gonna be able to clarify these legal issues as we go forward. This is not going to be implemented right away. We know that.
Okay, but we will be stating on the podcast that this comes from a Pacifica station, right? And we're going to say that, right? Somehow, somewhere in the podcast, correct? Isn't that correct?
It's not in the motion.
Yeah,
can we put that in the motion?
Can you read the motion again, please?
I would not, because then that would mean that all of the shows that I'm already podcasting would have to go back and start inserting an intro.
Or we could say in subsequent shows.
Can I take back everything I said?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. What?
Just pass the motion.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
What Ali pointed out was this is a beginning. This is saying this is a principle that we're establishing.
Yeah,
I don't think it's worth killing, and that's my opinion.
Thank you, Otis.
This is great. This is great. So I think we should just go to a vote, Heather.
Oh, Grace, I was wondering where you were. I see your phone number there. Okay.
I'm listening. I'm here.
So who again seconded this motion?
I did.
No seconds are needed in committee.
Oh, they're not. Oh, that's interesting. All right. So is there any opposition to this motion? All right. Seeing no opposition, the motion passes. So thank you, Ali, and thanks everyone. So this is a move forward. I'm really excited about this, I need to say. So in that this motion is passed in the programming committee, where do we go from here then? What do we do with this?
We send
Heather, may I be recognized?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I think where you're going with this is probably to the PNB, but
Yeah.
I asked to be recognized to ask you to copy that to Arthur, because Arthur's been involved in the discussions on the contract for podcasts. So pass this, shoot this over to him and let him take a quick look at it too.
Okay, that'd be great.
I'll email that to you, Heather.
Oh, thank you, Ali. I appreciate that. All right, everyone. I think we might have finished the program or the programming committee meeting. Have we finished it? I think so.
Another quick
Heather?
question, Heather.
Yeah, I have something to say, Heather. This is Kim.
Okay.
Go ahead, James.
Well, I just wanted to ask Heather, I mean, normally what you do is you pass a motion in committee and then it's either something that only stays within the committee because it's committee business, or you pass it on to the PNB. So I presume that's what you would be doing then, carrying this motion to the
Passed on to
PNB.
the PNB, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
okay.
But I'll send it first to Arthur.
Good idea.
Okay. Go ahead, Kim.
Well, this is one of the things that sort of like is unique to Pacifica or something. I mean, there are these little, and it's been brought up earlier, but they're little different sort of people doing the same thing. And this one doesn't know that one's. I mean, at some point, maybe Allie and Ursula and Otis. And, a year ago, Bertold was he had some podcasting idea. Y'all need to get on one page about this instead of having a lot of different people. And then here is Ursula wanting a lawyer for her contracts, and we already have Melody working on something. So it would be nice if you don't need a motion, but for everyone to sort of work together on this stuff. That's it.
Okay, thanks.
James, for a quick response.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to second what Kim said and say that, one possible thing you could do is try to bring some of those people to this committee. I see today you've got Otis, you've got Ursula. I mean, this is significant. Maybe, bring in Bertel, who's been working on this, try to bring in Arthur, who's been working on it with Melody. Bring in the people who are doing it and see if, like Kim says, see if we can focus it all.
This is Grace. Can I make
Yeah, go ahead, Grace,
a short statement?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with all this. I'd also like to really thank Ali and Ursula for the hard work that they do. And I'd also like to make a motion that's appropriate to all of this, and that is, I'd like to move that we add 3 more hours to the 24-hour day for these people. And we have to be.
So moved.
We have to be.
I'll second that.
We have to be. We have to be cognizant of the stress and strain that our staff are under because we're so understaffed. And if we can take up the slack and refrain from giving people extra work that's not necessarily would be as productive as the work that they're already doing. So that's all I wanted to say. But one other comment, and that is that I've been listening on and off to Leonard Lopate's show, and I think it's really excellent. And I hope it'll be picked up by other stations, and especially since it's very, very, besides really, it's different, it's high class, and it's also extremely high production values, which sometimes we don't have at the other stations. Really, really good sound, very professional. So, and I think it's just a really good show. And I know, having spoken to Bertold and Leonard, that not recently, but fairly recently, that they are more than willing to share that show and to do any logistics entailed with that. Just wanted to add that.
Oh, well, thanks so much, Grace.
That's all.
So
That's all. And aren't we going to vote on my extra 3 hours a day?
By acclamation.
You can have it as long as the hours are 45 minutes.
All right.
As long as they don't go into making PNB meetings 3 hours longer.
Well, I want you to know Ursula works an additional 6 hours actually, so in one day.
All right, Madam Chair.
Yes.
All right, I wanted to move the agenda to the last item. It looks like we're going to probably have I don't know what we're coming out of this meeting with in terms of the news programming stuff, in terms of concrete, who's going to implement what or when. And maybe someone can address what they think we've done so far on that one. I don't think we've gotten to the point that someone is assigned to do this X, Y, or Z, because I don't think we have all the players here today. Am I right in that? We're going to need another meeting to get that nailed down?
Yes, I think in another meeting, actually, is what I'm thinking, because we've already met for a little over 2 hours now. So I think we're going to adjourn. I'm sure.
No. I don't want to adjourn. I wanted to bring that fourth item on the agenda up.
All right, well, go ahead, Jim. I don't know how people's schedules are, but
well, again, the whole question is that the reason.
I have to.
All right, you can. Don't worry, Ali. The issue is to organize similar national gatherings with people from the network and the affiliates to examine these parts of the programming grids. And the reason I broke them down this way was music, I felt, was an easier way to get a whole bunch of music producers together and have them brainstorm with us as to what the best practices are in terms of music, since in certain stations, Los Angeles, excuse me, in Texas and in Washington, we have some very successful music programs. And I think that would be useful to have other. Pardon me? Anyway, we have other. It'd be important to get other music producers together to sort of see what we could get from that experience. Then the public affairs. Public affairs shows in all the different program and stations. I don't know. We haven't gotten the information from KPFA yet, but they have uneven responses. Many public affairs shows don't have many people listening at all. So the question to bring all those folks together would be to say, okay, what can we do better? What's good and bad, and what can we learn from this? Because we got to have some impact right now in the grids. The training sound art issue, that's a no-brainer. We have to really get that started throughout the whole network. Then this issue of Spanish language programming. I'm looking at the KPFK, Nielsen's, and they have a whole bunch of Spanish language programming Monday through Thursday from 8 o'clock to 12 o'clock. When you look at the Nielsen's, they have very little listeners. So what can we do to improve that and make that better? Arts programming. Again, that's in our mission statement. We don't necessarily have that much of a commitment to that these days because people have different clashing visions of what radio is, what Pacifica should be. But that's in our mission statement. And then the question of multimedia and social media, how do we bring that into the mix? Those are two separate items because multimedia, of course, creates a whole different kind of perspective at looking at a radio station, becomes a completely different kind of look at a platform, although I think we should head in that direction. And social media, of course, is where we have a tremendous need to catch up to the 21st century to integrate that. So those, to me, would be separate subjects of topics to have and I look on the music and public affairs issue and the training issue and the Spanish language issue and the arts issue, but particularly the first four, as they could have an immediate impact on how we're actually operating. Because we all know the problems with the audience. We all know the problems the audience is related to the amount of money we bring in. So that, I think, would be something useful for us to try to explore in the immediate future.
All right, that's great, Jim. Thank you for that. So actually, we'll talk about this at the next meeting, right? Go into more detail about it.
I would like the green light to just go ahead and start to deal with the music issue now. I would take the responsibility to send out the notices, set up a date to explore the music issue as a separate item. And I think we probably need another meeting to deal with the news issue. And then I think we should try to really focus in at that meeting on getting stuff implemented at that meeting.
Sounds great. Sounds great. So what about the music then? What did you want to do exactly?
Well, I wanted to bring in music producers throughout the network together. The same way.
I see. Oh, that'd be great. Wonderful.
And have them say what they're doing, it's great. What they're not doing, it's great. What can we do to improve their performance? What can we learn from each other?
Okay, great. All right. So you're going to move forward on that, right?
I'm going to move forward on that. I just want to see if there's any opposition or any other. I don't want to have a big, huge debate right now about it, but
I support it.
Is everybody cool with that?
I think it's great.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Okay, good. All right, so I'll move forward on that.
Okay, let me ask everyone before we adjourn, when do we want to hold the next meeting? Ideas from people, please. And 5 o'clock. The reason we did 5 o'clock on Saturday was because that was the time that Rachel Barr, she was having problems getting on earlier. But anyway, go ahead, Grace. You want to say something?
No, this is Ursula. I'm sorry, I was muted, but I wanted to respond to Jim. Jim, I wrote to you this individually too. I mean, this is really a place where you could really work together with the staff to, support what we're doing and have us support what you want to do. Because as I wrote to you individually, we hold weekly roundtable meetings with affiliates to do exactly what you're describing, to have discussions about different things. And, I think, first of all, I think it would be confusing to people at affiliate stations to have another group come and say, this is another type of meeting we're going to have. So I'm just asking you to consider working together with us instead of starting something completely new. Because there is a venue for this, and, it's set up, and it would add value to what we're doing, and we could put, our staff time behind it as well.
What do you think, Jim?
What are you talking about, Ursula? Because this is specific to the issues of the stations in the network right now. That's what I'm talking about. You guys doing something?
Well, you talked about getting together to discuss this with affiliates.
Well, I know I want to bring affiliates into the conversation as well, but because I'm sure we could learn a lot from the affiliates in terms of what music shows work well with the affiliates. But I'm talking more about focusing in on the 5 stations right now. That's to me the main problem, how to prevent them from going off into oblivion. We can do both things. Okay.
James for the stack.
Go ahead, Jim. Go ahead.
It sounds like what Ursula is saying is that the affiliates are already having this conversation. So why don't you at least go over there and see what's going on?
Yeah, and I agree, and I will. But I'm also saying that this has to be specific to the network right now, because what I'm talking about with the music programs is to have an impact on fundraising in the next 2 months or month. That is, what can we do within the next month or two within the network itself to improve the effectiveness of the music programs in terms of their relationship with their audiences locally.
I would ask Ursula, is there any reason that the affiliates can't be the vehicle for that network-wide discussion since you're already doing it, or would that distract from what you're doing?
Well, it sounds like, Jim, you want to do something that's specific to the Pacifica station. So I hear that. I mean,
Okay.
I just got involved because you said you wanted to discuss it with affiliates. So, and Pacifica stations are always invited to the roundtables. They just don't come. But I hear what you're saying. You're saying you want to make this specific to the Pacifica stations, and that's fine. That's fine. I'm not, I don't want to interfere with that.
No. There's a middle ground here. My objective is just simply to maybe we could try something. How often do you have these meetings with these folks?
They're weekly.
Weekly. All right. Well, we could certainly coordinate one. Again, what I wanted to do is bring the music people in because I figured that's the easiest way to get a bang for the buck, since these shows do pretty well in Washington and in Houston. And I wanted to sort of bring other people in from, we may or may not get anybody from Berkeley, but certainly from Los Angeles, from New York, and have them all together. And then I'm sure they could, get a lot of great insights from the folks. So sure, we could do it together. That sounds cool. Let's see what happens.
All right.
All right, everyone. Ursula, you wanted to say something else?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Either way is fine.
So when do we hold the next meeting, everyone? A couple of weeks from now? Next week? And should it be on Saturdays? And if so, what time on Saturday? So ideas from people, please.
Well, unfortunately, I think we have to do these things with a lot of energy and urgency. So unfortunately, I'd hate to have to do it next week, but I'm just thinking about all the types of financial pressures we're under.
Exactly. I agree.
And I'd rather do it in 2 months from now, but unfortunately, we don't have that luxury. So yeah, I would think we have to do it next week. Frankly, I hate to say that, but I have better things on a Saturday to do sometimes than to get aggravated about this stuff. But unfortunately, that's our responsibility to have to deal with it.
So what time?
Well,
where's all the response for people? I mean, do you want to do this at 5 o'clock again?
Get excited by thinking about a meeting next week.
Ideas from, right, Jim, hold on. Anybody else with ideas on this? Again, the reason we did this was because of Rachel Barr, right? Because that's when she could come. But I don't know. I know she's not here today, but so.
No, this worked for me today. I don't know.
That's okay.
Yeah, it did work. It was fine.
Can we
But
do that again, everyone?
Ready to adjourn, pardon.
Yeah, we could have a doodle poll right now if that's cool.
All right, so, all right, well, right now we'll plan a meeting next week, next Saturday at 5 o'clock. That's what we'll plan.
Very good.
So,
Mm.
all right. So I want to apologize to everyone for the confusion at the beginning this time. I had all of these emails from the last meeting and it just got kind of dispersed here. So I apologize for that. But all right, everybody, I want to thank you for all your comments and your great work. So we'll see you next week. Okay? Is that all right?
Thank you, Heather.
My
Thank you.
pleasure.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Heather. Good
Ursula. So
meeting.
glad you were here. All right,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
Ursula.
you.